maybe it's weird, but I like being in those situations where there isn't a checklist or where the only checklist is asking yourself, does this help us to grow as a team? Is this the best thing to be spending our time and energy on right now?
In today's episode, I have visiting artisan. Let's see how innovation meets artistry as we forge something extraordinary together.
You are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
Hello, Guilders, and welcome to another episode of The Innovation Forge. I am your host, David Dysart, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on this journey into the innovative world of higher education and adaptive enrollment management. What if the inquiry form on your college's website is quietly costing you thousands of prospective students, just because it takes 3 clicks to get to? Or what if the real key to better Slate usage isn't hiring someone to fix it, but empowering your own team to own it? Today I'm joined by Tristan Deveney, founder of Predicate Higher Ed, seasoned Slate consultant, and the kind of person who once built a fan site that sparked actual marriages. In this episode, we unpack what it really means to build capacity, not dependency, in your Slate instance. Tristan shares his journey from admissions to consulting, the philosophy behind his white paper on inquiry forms, and why internal tools like portals are the future of smart, scalable operations. Whether you're a Slate captain, a data nerd, or just someone trying to make your institution work smarter, not harder, this episode is packed with insight you won't want to miss. Let's see how an empowered journey takes shape today. Tristan Deveney is the founder of Predicate Higher Ed. He started working with Slate in 2012, first on the institutional side at Clark University before joining Technolutions as a senior program manager and client support engineer. While at Technolutions, he served as the data team lead, developing configurable join documentation and training resources, and piloting the community conversation series. In addition to querying, reporting, and custom SQL, he specialized in portals, permissions, and reader/workflows. Tristan has been a Slate consultant since 2023, starting as the first developer hired at FGI Consultants, a platinum preferred partner, where he led the solutions engineering team. He served as solution architect through the completion of FGI's acquisition by Kennedy & Co. In 2025, he decided to leave to launch Predicate Higher Ed as a Slate consulting practice focused on helping lean teams use Slate to its full potential. Tristan leads a wide variety of projects for the firm, including advanced troubleshooting as part of the support retainers, custom reporting and dashboard design, portal development, and branding updates. He earned the Slate Certified Professional Qualification in 2025 as part of the first cohort of Slate Certified by Technolutions.
Hey, David, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. You mentioned that you first actually got into web development in high school by building a fan site for a book series. What was the series?
It was the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman.
Oh, very nice. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the site was, what your experience was, and the community that you were able to actually build around this book series?
Yeah, so this might tell you something about the kind of nerd that I am, but so I guess just because I loved the series so much and wanted to connect with kind of fellow nerds who shared that interest, I taught myself PHP at the time so I could build a website for it. And yeah, it ended up with about a few thousand visitors a day, had a whole community, and 25 years later, it's been responsible for at least a few marriages of people who met on the forums, which kind of always blows my mind. But the things that you can make happen in the world if you're passionate about something, right?
Totally. And I just love how you've continued to kind of be embedded in these communities, whether it's the books or Slate, and still being able to make such an impact. I mean, we just had a marriage in the Slate community at Summit a couple months ago. But yes, I'm so excited to hear more about your journey, and really starting with, the starting point. You began your career in admissions and communications before moving actually into the Slate system and your subsequent data roles. What first drew you toward the technical side of Slate, and how did that shift shape how you think and support CRM teams today?
Sure. So I started in an entry-level assistant director position. I had been a tour guide in college, went to grad school for English, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with that, so I thought I would give admissions a try. And the institution that I ended up working for was just wrapping up their Slate implementation at the time. They had been one of the first 50 or 75 or so schools that implemented, kind of part of that wave that left Recruitment Plus for Slate. So I essentially learned how admissions worked as a profession by learning Slate. That was my context for how you plan your fall travel as a counselor, how you run an open house, how you read applications, and so on. And I remember being on the road at college fairs in 2012 or 2013 next to other admissions counselors behind our tables, just kind of chatting. And there was a real, almost conspiratorial excitement about this new Slate tool that people were starting to use. And that enthusiasm that people had for it really stuck with me. That's not normal. That's not the typical reaction that people have to software. So I think I had a sense early on that that was something to watch. And then sort of as I moved into an associate director position at Clark, there was also a vacancy at the same time in both the university marketing office and the institutional research office. And the role that I was in was meant to be a liaison to those two teams. So I ended up being involved more directly in like branding redesigns and overhauling of the print collateral and just kind of working more closely with the marketing team. And as I did that, I got a sense for the kinds of questions that they had about admissions data and how things like ping could probably help them, but that they didn't really necessarily realize that was something that we had access to. So I think that was a moment of realization for me that there was this resource, this tool that could really benefit other teams on campus outside of admissions. And then on the IR side, I was involved with an effort to bring predictive modeling in-house with a tool called Rapid Insight, which I think has since been acquired by EAB. But so we had been working with a third-party firm for like modeling NTR and projecting enrollment revenue and that sort of thing. But we wanted something we could run on demand. And so I was part of that effort to bring that in. And as a result of that was working very closely with a lot of Slate data, kind of getting to the weeds, and just realized that I wanted to do more with that. And that was sort of what led me to Technolutions.
That's fantastic. I love that your experience was able to take so many different iterations as you continue to build your experience and your interests. You mentioned Technolutions, though. So during your time at Technolutions, you became a subject matter expert in areas of like exports, integrations, and portals. What did you learn in those years about how institutions are actually using Slate?
Yeah, so when I joined, we all did a little bit of everything, right? So we all answered tickets in the service desk. We taught at Launchpad. We moderated sessions at Summit, wrote documentation. We were all everybody in that program manager role was working with newly implementing schools. And the model was basically that we were generalists, even if we had those one or two areas where we specialized. And so I think because of that, it was a common experience for us to have to unlearn what was specific to our institution, since we could be getting questions from any type of school. So I think a lot of what I went in thinking were just the way things were done in Slate turned out to be processes that worked well for the kind of school that I was at, but that didn't necessarily translate to every type of school. So maybe it's less that institutions think that they're using Slate one way and actually using it differently, and more just that it can be easy sometimes to fall into that assumption that the way you were taught, or the way your institution does things, or the way that you were advised to do things when you implemented 5 or 10 years ago is just the way things are. Slate's always changing. Different institutions are using Slate differently, and trying to decide what the right approach is really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish, the capacity and skills and resources that you have on your team, how a process might scale over time, and so on.
Yeah, it's a very quickly branching decision tree on literally any choice that you make with Slate or other systems, just because of how fast they iterate and grow and institution-specific pieces. But so moving beyond Technolutions, then, you were actually the very first Slate developer hired at FGI and later helped lead solutions engineering. What was it like to build that function from the ground up? And how did that experience prepare you for independent consulting?
Yeah. So I'd say two things. First, I was very fortunate to be able to learn from Tim Fields, who was the founder of FGI, and to watch him working with clients and planning how to approach projects. He was a big believer in agile project management, agile development, which I had had some exposure to as well, but hadn't really been as embedded in day to day until I joined. And so for folks who aren't familiar, the way that I explain agile is to say that it's the idea that if you're working on a project, you should focus on delivering something that's working, that people can get their hands on and start testing as quickly as possible. Because what you want for a project to be successful is for the people who are going to be using the end result to give you direct feedback and for you to be able to iterate on that feedback, to give them a version 2, and then get feedback on that and so on until it meets the actual needs that they have, rather than spending too much time up front trying to map out every possible thing that you might have to do and limiting yourself to that before users actually have a chance to see something in action. So I think that probably resonates for anyone who's been part of big projects. It's important to have a direction and a plan, but maintaining that ability to change and pivot and focus on delivering what's actually needed is the best way to make sure a project like that's successful. And then second, I guess one of the reasons why I decided to join FGI in the first place was that I was attracted to the idea of helping to shape the team at a company like that, of shaping processes and not necessarily having a playbook or stepping into a role that was already defined. Maybe it's weird, but I like being in those situations where there isn't a checklist or where the only checklist is asking yourself, does this help us to grow as a team? Is this the best thing to be spending our time and energy on right now? And the way that you do that is by asking whether this is something that best serves clients and gives them a great experience. So as I kind of step out on my own here, I'm trying to take inspiration from a lot of what I saw worked really well with Agile, with responsive support, with some of those principles, and just making sure that that's front and center for my own practice.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like that Agile framework definitely fits a lot of the requirements of building those big projects in Slate. I mean, there's so many bells and whistles and directions you can go. So there's kind of, okay, I'm going to get you a product that is functional, and then you're going to kind of keep iterating with me as we continue to build this out. I mean, that's such a great way to handle, again, most projects. I mean, everything's a little bit different, but it really fits with a lot of the Slate functionality and possibilities that you can go with. And then, yeah, I think a lot of Slate users have that kind of creative entrepreneurial mindset of being able to build and create. So I love that has led you to starting your own company. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the completion of the FGI Kennedy and Company merger. As that kind of became a natural inflection point for you, how did you recognize that it was really the right moment to step out on your own?
Yeah, so I think it's natural when there's a company merger to kind of step back and look at what the focus is, look at the kind of work that you're doing, how you're working day to day, because it's all kind of in the process of being redefined at that point, right? You have two companies who each did things their own way, and they're now creating a new combined approach. So it sort of naturally leads to a lot of those questions where you might realize the right answer for this new combined company, the thing that's going to help them to hit their targets for the next quarter, maybe that's not actually what I would choose personally or what I would have prioritized given where I am professionally. And so I think what I kept coming back to was that it's really important for me at this point in my career to be able to spend time with clients, really going deep on some of the more complex builds, or spending time with experienced teams, helping them get to the next level, helping them to train up new staff. But yeah, kind of really spending time with them where I wasn't doing it for them. I was helping them to get to a point where they could do it themselves. So I wanted to create a role for myself where that could be the focus, and also where I'd have the flexibility to run with an idea like researching current practices around inquiry forums, which just, it takes time to do that, and there might not be space to do that when you're in a larger organization. So again, I've been deeply grateful to Tim for his mentorship. I was also really impressed by a lot of the great work that I saw on the Kennedy team. I think they're going to do some amazing things, but yeah, it was the right moment for me to kind of hang out my shingle and go independent.
I love that. And let's talk a little bit more about kind of your new focus areas, or the areas that you're focusing more on now, like the advanced troubleshooting, configurable joins training, portal development. Why do you see these areas as the most pressing needs for Slate teams right now?
Yeah, so I'd say the pattern that I've seen over the past few years is that a lot of institutions who are kind of through that first year or two post-implementation, they're functioning, they're getting through their cycle prep tasks, they're making incremental progress, but they often don't have the bandwidth to get to some of the big items on their list that just take a certain amount of focus time. So usually the teams have a lot of great capability in-house. Folks who at this point are pretty comfortable with configurable joins themselves, for example. But the challenge is that that capability doesn't often come with enough capacity. So whether when you're talking about a Slate team of one or a team of two, those kinds of Slate captains can't be everywhere. So they're often focused on being reactive. They're putting out fires. They're maybe trying to untangle the complexity of an instance that they inherited from someone else, and they just don't necessarily have enough breathing room to make progress on the kinds of improvements that over time would make a big difference for their instance. So maybe they're getting pressure from leadership for more reporting, or they're being asked to integrate with new systems, and so on. So where I can help in a situation like that, and what I'm focusing on, is to either free up time for the captain by being that escalation resource myself. So your comms person reaches out to you with a question, you would normally get sidetracked trying to respond. So instead you route it to me so that I can get them unblocked and keep you as a captain focused on the kind of work in the instance that requires your specialized knowledge, your familiarity with institutional processes, your campus relationships, things that I can't do for you. Or if there's something like a complex report or a portal that could maybe help streamline something that you're working on, that just, again, kind of takes that stretch of uninterrupted focus time that you just don't have. I can step in and get something like that in place quickly, and sort of going back to that idea of agile, getting you that minimum viable product, that version 1 of something that can help you clarify what would actually be most helpful as we start to expand this, as we start to grow this, versus you spending your time going down a rabbit hole. And on the training piece too, I think a lot of captains are now at this point where they feel confident in kind of their day-to-day use of something like configurable joins, but they're still fielding questions from users maybe who aren't as technical, or maybe they're holding back on giving out CJ's permissions more widely because they know that as soon as they open up access to that, they're going to get bombarded with questions, and they think that it's just faster just to do it for people. So I can be that person who spends an hour or two a week with a small group of end users, kind of getting them comfortable, helping them develop those instincts that you need to be effective with CJs, and make sure that they feel supported and confident in that. But yeah, I think from what I've seen, a lot of schools are in that position, so it just seemed like an area where I could make a difference.
I love that, and I've definitely fallen into that mindset a few times. Like, I could train you how to do this, but I could also just do it in like 7 seconds,
Exactly.
and just we move forward, and then run into that issue again next week and the week after. So I love that training focus as well. But you definitely alluded to it, so I want to make sure we chat about it. The white paper. So your first independent white paper, which recently came out, is a deep dive into inquiry form best practices based on research nearly 1,000 college websites. Can you share what motivated the project? What surprised you most with the findings?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of take a step back because I'd noticed that I'd been having a lot of conversations with implementing schools over the past year or so, where the same kinds of questions were coming up again and again about inquiry form best practices. And while I could speak to the implications of taking one approach or the other, there was kind of this gap in hard data that I could point to and say, this is what the majority of your peers chose to do in this situation. This is what you should think about doing based on what we're seeing. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and a lot of examples and discussions in the forums, but not really the hard numbers behind that. So as I was thinking about what kind of consulting practice I wanted to build, this sort of felt like a good example of the kind of question that I knew a lot of people had, where there wasn't good data at the moment. And so it was sort of a chance for me to put together a resource that I think will be useful, even for people who might not necessarily be working with me as clients. So the way that I approached this, I was kind of putting myself in the shoes of a prospective first year who wanted to receive more information from a college. So I started with a list that I had pulled from the IPEDS data center, just looking at a list of U.S. institutions in the 50 states and D.C. that grant bachelor's degrees. They're not specialty schools. And so in some of the blog posts, I'll go into more detail about the specific Carnegie classifications that I was looking at. But basically, yes, I came up with a list of it was about 1,200 total schools. And I just worked my way down the list first just to see how many clicks it took to even get to the inquiry form, starting from the homepage. And then once I was on the form, you can kind of tell from the embed code and when you're inspecting element and dev tools whether it's a Slate form or not. So if it was, those were the ones that I came back to analyze in more detail. And I was definitely surprised, first of all, just at how often the inquiry form is several clicks away from the homepage. When I started analyzing the results, the average across all the schools where I was able to find an RFI form was 1.7 clicks. So not too bad, but there were still 195 schools that I looked at where it took 3 or more clicks to get to the form.
Wow.
And there were 49 where I wasn't even able to identify an RFI form at all. It was only an email address that you could contact or a phone number or something like that, which was wild to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then one of the interesting patterns there too is that the average number of clicks goes up with the school size and with selectivity. So small schools that are less selective are under 1.5 clicks on average, while the largest schools, so more than 20,000 students who admit fewer than 25%, the average for that group was 3.2 clicks. So maybe there's an access component to this too that I think is going to be worth thinking about. And then in terms of the form contents themselves, I was surprised to see a lot of AI consent fields starting to crop up, or schools starting to incorporate AI language into the SMS consent field that they were collecting. So I think that's going to be a trend to watch as more institutions are starting to use like AI recruiting tools, whether that's a third-party tool or something native to Slate.
Yeah, I definitely feel like with legal in the conversation, I think we are definitely going to see more and more of those AI consent forms as institutions do start onboarding those vendors. Because I don't know if there's a lot of ways, at least again from a general counselor perspective, of not adding some kind of language to those forms, just to let folks know and informed consent, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm curious. I haven't checked with some of the vendors like College Fine, but I'd be curious if they provide suggested text for that. That's maybe something to chat about with schools that are starting to work with those vendors. But and again, I'm not providing legal advice on whether you should or should not use that language. But yeah, that was just one of the patterns that I noticed.
Yeah, this is definitely not formal legal advice. It seems to be the conversations that are being had that at least I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That is definitely, if you're not asking your counsel if you need to add this kind of language, if you're using AI recruiting services, just ask your counsel, and I'm sure they'll have plenty of thoughts and opinions to fill many meetings. And I love that you're able to identify these niches and being able to offer such great and dynamic information to the community. I know that definitely was kind of my mindset as well. Like, oh, can I just write the book about this? This is the conversations people are having. There's not a ton of resources. How are you hoping more specifically that institutions will use this to benchmark? Is it more so in the user experience? Is it more on the actual forms being asked? Is it on downstream after the form is being clicked? Or is it just everything? This is a really encompassing project.
Yeah, I think the goal was to prompt some of those conversations, especially if it was a school that maybe implemented a few years ago and they made decisions at the time about how to structure the inquiry form or where to link it on the site, but maybe they haven't revisited that other than updating the prompts and everything every year as part of cycle prep. But I think trying to inspire those conversations and trying to maybe connect folks with say the marketing office. So one of the other findings was that of the Slate forms that I looked at, roughly 1 in 10 didn't have the mobile branding template enabled, which means that on certain devices and browsers, if someone's accessing that form, they'll see the default gray mobile template across the top, as opposed to seeing your institutional branding for mobile. So just thinking about maybe there are those cases where there's not as consistent an experience between what your marketing team thinks is happening on that form and what is actually there. So just trying to give folks some conversation starters, giving them some sense of what their peers are doing, and hopefully again creating an experience that's ultimately going to be more accessible for students and trying to reduce some of those points of friction along the way.
I love it. Yeah, as of this recording, that you've released the first blog post and a LinkedIn post and stuff. So I'm really excited to see the rest of the findings on this. And a big theme of your work, though, is helping institutions build confidence in their data and their own in-house capabilities. How do you approach that balance between solving problems directly and actually empowering teams to solve it themselves?
Yeah, so I'd say if it's something that isn't as time sensitive, or the person who reached out, they have a few minutes to jump on a screen share, um, they do often benefit from either watching as I run through my thought process, or having me coach them. Sort of the classic rubber duck idea, right? If you kind of create the space for someone to talk through their thought process, they often hit on the solution faster on their own, and they get more comfortable, with kind of thinking through how certain processes might be working. But one of my goals in any sort of support project is to try to help the team grow their own troubleshooting skills like that, meeting them where they are. So if they're not comfortable looking at error logs or audit logs, maybe this is something that we can use as an example. Or if I'm seeing something unusual, getting them to think through how most efficiently they could recreate it, and then just confirm what happens in a case like that. So that, I think those skills develop over time, and everyone's at a different point. But I have a lot of fun nerding out over solving problems, and I think that helps, that when it feels more collaborative, people feel more comfortable asking those clarifying questions and trying it out for themselves. I like to say that Slate's too complex to fit in any one person's head, even Alexander. We're all in this together. We're all learning and encountering new situations and new behaviors that surprise us, which is what keeps this interesting. So, I think just what's key is that when you do find something that surprises you, that you document it, that you file it away as an example somewhere, and you keep it in the back of your mind, so that when you see a similar pattern in the future, you can draw on that when you need it. At this point, I've seen a lot, so I can draw on a lot of those patterns and share. But I want to get people to that same place, where if that's something that they want for themselves professionally.
Yeah, and I definitely love that idea of being able to ride shotgun with your Slate captain, your consultant, your vendor, whatever it might be, to just see how they're doing processes. And I think that's such a great element, whether it's the Slack channel, or the Facebook group, or Summit. You're just seeing all these different ways people are doing things, and it just kind of gets filed away in the back of your head, and a project will come up 6 months down the line, like, you know what, I saw something similar. I think we could probably do this in a new, novel, interesting, unique way, whatever it is, based off of this thing I saw. So I love that you're just able to empower folks so effectively by just including them in the process. I love that. And yeah, for institutions considering partnering with an independent consultant like you, what would you want them to know about your philosophy of consulting and the value you aim to bring just beyond the technical fixes?
Sure. And different firms will be the right fit for different teams or different types of projects. But for the kind of work that I do, the philosophy is that I think it should be a partnership. I'm a strong believer in the idea that the best way to learn Slate, or the best way to get yourself to a place where you can do more with Slate, is to get in there and experiment and work through the messy realities of managing an instance. I would never want to come in and set something up for someone and then just leave, or just check tasks off of a list. If I'm building something, I'm going to be looking for ways to get you involved, to make sure not just that you can maintain it, but that you feel like it's an example that you can use, like you said, something that you can reference for those other ideas that you might have down the road. So just, again, making sure that it's a collaborative approach, that it's iterative, that it goes back to that idea of agile, of creating something that you can react to quickly, and that you can then kind of look at together and figure out what comes next. Which, again, I think that goes back to what I saw worked really well in that heyday of the service desk, where you could have, you could request a focus call with someone from Technolutions, with someone who specialized in a certain area, and they'd get you started on something or get you unblocked. But the goal was never to fill a gap in staffing for you. It was more about enablement and growing individual teams, because in turn, that's what grows the community and makes for more interesting and effective uses of Slate generally.
Yeah, I really enjoy that approach to consulting, and I think we are definitely seeing that. I recently created a musical called The Broker's Bargain that kind of focuses on the other, or the shadow side of that. It's like, it's that easy pitch. It's the, let's just do this. You'll do well with your board of trustees by implementing this flashy new thing, but it's not the empowering aspect of it. It's the way to actually help institutions be successful, whether they're currently engaged with you or moving beyond and continuing to grow. So I really, really appreciate that approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. And thank you so much for those insights. I'm glad that you could share them with the community. While you're here, though, I'd like to give your thoughts on another question for our segment, Crafting Change. Portals, I mean, they're always a great topic and very popular, but there's so many use cases for them, so many different directions we can go. What's just a great use case that you're starting to see or starting to do more that people should know about?
So I'd say one trend that I've been seeing is the increasing use of portals for internal tooling. So I presented at Summit last year on using portals for matching processes. So I was presenting with a client who used a portal to place candidates into internships. So they had custom data sets for internship firms, a child data set for the internships that were associated with firms, and they were using related data set row fields to link specific internship slots to admitted candidates. And then I ran into a similar use case with an arts organization that was placing workshop attendees into events based on their preferences and workshop capacity. I was working with a graduate institution that had an interview day where they needed to match PhD candidates with faculty interviewers and kind of coordinate schedules and availability. So these were all processes that the teams were previously handling in Excel, but that meant that they were exporting data from Slate, they were manipulating it, re-importing it. So you ran into issues with data getting stale or out of sync if multiple people were trying to work on this at the same time, or just security best practices. You don't want to be emailing each other lists of records. So with a portal, you can keep all of that data in Slate. It updates live. You can have multiple people working on it at once. You can have form communications that fire as soon as there are certain kinds of updates. So just a much better, higher quality experience, both for the teams who are trying to complete those matching processes, or for the students or for the candidates that they're working with. So I suspect we're going to see more of those kinds of portals becoming more widespread, just similar to some of the internal ticketing portal examples that people have been sharing. I think it's a great entry point for folks to start to think more about what's possible in Slate, and it's often the kind of thing that if you're working with a consultant on a simple version of that or a proof of concept. Most of us working in the space have done enough of these at this point that we can stand up something like that in an afternoon. So it's pretty approachable in terms of the entry point, and it gives you, like I was saying, something that you can learn from and iterate on, rather than just being a one-time build.
Yeah, I love just the general movement we've had over the last few years of treating Slate as a tool for staff. And those internal empowering systems. Like, I'm sure most, if not all of us, have moved some different processes into Slate that we were able to streamline and make more effective. But I love this portal layer of really being able to functionally use Slate on top of the entire process. I really look forward to seeing more examples of this. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so many great takeaways. Before we wrap up, though, every artisan leaves their mark in the Smith's signature. I'll ask a few quick questions so you can kind of stamp your personal hallmark on today's conversation. What's one tool, it could be digital or otherwise, that you rely on daily to keep your work running smoothly?
So I'm a big fan of a tool called Miro for whiteboarding or process diagramming. I rely on that pretty heavily if I'm building an integration or if I'm working on new custom data sets and I'm trying to put together an ERD or something. So just a tool that helps me kind of visualize my thought process.
Love it. I've seen it, not really been able to use it much. So definitely an interesting tool that definitely seems like it has so many possibilities to really improve that process behind the scenes. So what has caught your attention or sparked creativity or innovation for you?
Yeah, so I tend to look outside of higher ed for a lot of sources of inspiration. I've gone down a rabbit hole lately with podcasts of physicians, usually doctors early in their careers who maybe have found that the modern kind of fee-for-service practice doesn't really work for them, so they're going into like direct primary care or family medicine. I just think it's interesting sometimes to see the commonalities across fields where, I think so many people are feeling like if you have high standards for yourself and the kind of level of service that you want to provide, Most industries are incentivized against that. So, a doctor who wants to be able to spend time getting to know their patients is pushed to see 30 or 40 people a day in a traditional practice. So it's just kind of interesting to hear how other professions are managing problems like that, which might sound familiar to a lot of us, and just kind of looking for alternatives or ways of reinventing how things work.
Yeah, I love that. Great kind of cross industry perspective can really help.
Yeah.
And if you could recommend just one book, article, or one of those podcast episodes to someone looking to improve or innovate in higher ed, what would it be?
So I think, like a lot of people, I've been very interested in AI over the past few years. I think if you're curious about that, one article, or I think it was originally a talk, but that I found really useful was by Maggie Appleton, who's a product designer from the UK. She presented a talk called Home Cooked Software and Barefoot Developers. So again, not higher ed specific, but for a certain kind of Slate person who's interested in using AI to build custom tools for themselves or for their teams, like with those portals. Maybe this could be an inspiration, but basically she's just talking about how there's this long tail of needs that it doesn't make sense to solve for when you're kind of driven by the economics of traditional software development. But as AI makes it easier for someone who might be the kind of person to build something really creative, some dashboard or spreadsheet in a tool like Notion or Miro, that kind of person, even if they're not a programmer, maybe it seems like they'd be well positioned to start making custom apps to solve some of those more immediate problems that are relevant to them or to their teams when you give them access to LLMs. So I think she just laid out that idea really well in that article.
Yeah, there are so many large industries doing such interesting things that the niche industries might not get as much overflow from those dedicated service providers, but being able to empower the people already in those smaller industries to do those things is a very exciting frontier over the next few years, especially in things like higher education.
Right.
And what is one project, goal, or aspiration you have on the block to work on right now?
Yeah, so I'm wrapping up that inquiry form analysis that we talked about and kind of focused on publishing the rest of the series right now. But I definitely want to do something similar with visits or with event portals specifically, just to kind of start digging into how different institutions are structuring those and see if there are any similar patterns that would be beneficial for the community to be aware of.
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be so exciting to see more and understand your analysis of it as institutions have probably, some more slowly than others, moved from landing pages to actual dedicated portals, and having that opportunity to innovate around like, okay, we can blue sky this now. We can make this whatever we want. I think that's going to be some really interesting institutions that can kind of be curated in a project like that. So very excited to see that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into it.
And if listeners wanted to connect with you about what you talked about today, where is the best place to message you? I'll be sure to add it into the actual notes.
Yeah, so you can find us on LinkedIn. The Predicate Higher Ed page is now live, and also the website, predicatehighered.com. That's where I'm posting the full-length articles that are part of this inquiry form series.
Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation today, and thank you for taking your time to share your experience and insights with us. I know your journey and expertise has given myself and all of us a lot to think about. Thank you again so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, David.
All right, it's time for the Blueprint Breakdown, the part of the show where we sketch out the essential takeaways from today's conversation. Whether you're leading a Slate team or just getting started with CRM strategy, or even looking to scale your impact, these are the ideas worth keeping in your back pocket. Capacity is as important as capability. Even highly skilled Slate users struggle when they don't have enough time. Tristan emphasized that most teams know how to do the work, they just need breathing room to focus on it. That's where smart support and delegation comes in. Agile isn't just for developers. Tristan's approach to consulting borrows from Agile principles, focusing on rapid iteration, early feedback, and building version 1 instead of perfecting version 10. It's a game changer for institutions bogged down by slow planning. Inquiry forms need a rethink. His white paper research across 1,000 college websites showed that access to inquiry forms is often varied, and that could mean lost leads. He also spotted emerging trends like AI consent language showing up. Portals are the new power tool. Beyond student-facing pages, institutions are now using Slate portals for internal processes, like matching candidates to internships. This replaces clunky Excel processes with live, secure, scalable tools. Empowerment is the endgame. Tristan's philosophy is simple. Don't just fix the problem, grow the team's ability to solve future ones. That means walking them through debugging, modeling best practices, and creating durable knowledge. And that's your blueprint breakdown. If any of those sparked ideas for your team, hit pause and start a conversation. Or, better yet, send this episode to your favorite Slate captain. What struck me in particular was Tristan's ethos of empowerment. It mirrors what we heard earlier this semester with Christina Calpe. And it's so exciting to see this present in the Slate consulting ecosystem. It's the flip side to my Broker's Bargain musical. I'll include a link to it in the description, but it's a musical in 3 albums. The Codex practitioners, in search of the implements of perpetual flux, are tempted by the broker. He swoops in with that velvety Disney villain smoothness to tempt our heroes with easy answers, dependent relationships, and shortcuts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast, or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true, and let's forge something extraordinary together.
System got a plan, but too much on your shoulders. For one hand, you're putting out fires, chasing the day, but the big ideas keep slipping away.
What if the fix was not control, but trust in the train and making learning the goal? You don't need someone to take the wheel. You need the space to build what's real.
Click, build, empower. clarity, for confidence, for capability.